Imagine if The Wizard of Oz was an 80s dark fantasy. That is Return to Oz. With the movie Wicked releasing in cinemas this week, my girlfriend and I went to see the musical it's based on, and I actually quite enjoyed it. After seeing the musical, it left me wanting more, and I tried to watch the original 1939 movie, The Wizard of Oz. I knew that Disney held the rights to the Oz franchise, so I checked on Disney Plus, and I discovered that the movie itself isn't actually owned by Disney, but instead MGM and Warner Bros. However, Disney does have content under the IP. Sam Raimi's Oz the Great and Powerful from 2013 was on there, a story about the Wizard of Oz before he became the Wizard of Oz. But then there's the movie we're talking about today, Return to Oz, which despite being produced by a completely different studio and the fact that Dorothy looks about 10 years younger, this is meant to be a direct sequel to the original film. The story begins with Dorothy remembering her time at Oz and wanting to go back, but literally no one believes her. So much so, they send her to get electric shock therapy. Off to a belter. Luckily for Dorothy, a storm cuts off the power, preventing the entire electrocution from going ahead.
And now you are the fool!
And a young girl from the facility actually rescues her. They get chased down by one of the nurses, but both of them end up falling into a river, pulling them far away from land. And the girl that saves Dorothy just, dies. Yeah. But after using a wooden crate as a raft, Dorothy survives the night and is woken up by a talking hen.
Oh, I've never been so wet my whole life.
Which could seem strange to the blind eye, but this is of course revealing that Dorothy has once again made it to Oz. Side note, I'm personally convinced that she's just dead at this point. Maybe the first trip was real, but she's definitely dead. There's no way she survived that. It seems as though the rocks are alive, but more on this later because Dorothy has priorities. She's hungry, and she wants to see her friends, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion. She's a good friend at least. She stumbles upon her old house and gives her chicken a rundown of the entire area, although it is not looking the same. Even the yellow brick road is in a shambles of a state. Now, this was a bit confusing. I was under the impression that if the house still existed when she returned, then surely the house wouldn't have been there then. I don't know. Am I missing something? But anyway, the rock that we talked about earlier with the eyes is actually some rock dude who keeps reporting back to another rock dude who clearly doesn't want Dorothy around, nor do they want the chicken around for some reason. It's then that Dorothy discovers that the people of Oz, along with their friends, the Tin Man and the Cowardly Lion, have been turned to stone. Then we're introduced to the Wheelers, the antagonistic mob of this movie that was sure to give any 80s kids 2 months worth of nightmares. What even is the purpose of ththese guys? What, and why do they have wheels for limbs? What is going on there? What's that got to do with anything? They chase Dorothy down and hit a dead end, but she discovers, the chicken discovers, a hole in the wall that would be a perfect fit for the key that she found earlier on. This is also when the name the Gnome King is mentioned for the first time, revealing that he is the one who doesn't like chickens and doesn't want Dorothy around. Oh wow, who is this guy? So this mechanical man is named Tik Tok, and he was created as a soldier of Oz. Apparently there's also a book dedicated to him. I don't know, I've never heard of him before this, if I'm being honest. Apparently the Scarecrow, who is now the King of Oz, locked Tik Tok away specifically so Dorothy could find him. Sure. I mean, just by the way he's walking, are you seriously trying to convince me that this guy was just a soldier of Oz? Wow, cool, no worries. Yeah, I'll shut up. Okay, so just to really lay down the groundwork, the Gnome King is evil, and he took over Oz by turning all living beings into stone. Tik Tok isn't a living being, which is why he's alive, and the Wheelers were recruited by him to make sure no one slips through the cracks, I suppose. That's what I've gathered so far. So now they must find Princess Mombi, because apparently she's the only one who knows where to find the Scarecrow. And this takes them 10 seconds. They walk through the first door they see, and she's just sat there, chilling, playing a little guitar. The princess really creepily takes Dorothy to a room filled with conscious severed heads, only to find out that the queen can just replace her head at will. Why? Why is that a thing? She also wanted to behead Dorothy, so she kidnaps her, and then Tik Tok tries to help, but I am coming, Dorothy. So Dorothy gets thrown into a room, and there's lots of things in there, along with a big mural of her old friends, the Scarecrow, the Lion, the Tin Man, and it's also right when pre-Jack Skeleton rocks up, and his name is literally Jack Pumpkinhead, so I would not be surprised if there was any inspiration from this film. Now, this guy is clearly very nice, but I guess so uneasy watching this type of stuff. I don't even have that fear of mascots that people have, but just he looks so weird. Jack tells Dorothy that there's a special dust that when you sprinkle it onto something, it brings it to life. So they plot to steal the dust and make like a couch moose hybrid with wings that flies them to safety. They make it through the night, but the ropes are coming loose and they end up having to literally hold the chairs together for dear life. But then as he's leaning over, Jack loses his head. It's a whole thing, and then it breaks apart and they're just falling, but somehow everyone survives. Dorothy just lands on the sofa and everybody else, I guess, isn't real, so they just don't die. Then out from the side of the cliff, the Gnome King starts speaking to them and opens a massive crater in the ground that Dorothy falls into. He tells Dorothy that he actually turned the King's Scarecrow into an ornament, and that in order to get him back, she and her friends must go in and pick ornaments at random, and you get 3 chances. You've got to say the word Oz while touching it and just hope that you've chosen the right one, because if not, they will also turn into an ornament. Gump goes in first, and unfortunately he fails, and then Jack and Tik Tok kind of just volunteer themselves because they're already technically lifeless, and they're like, look, if we turn into ornaments, we can still just chill, whereas you need to eat and stuff like that. So they go in, Jack goes in first, and he fails, and then Tik Tok goes in, but his action runs out mid-search, because yeah, side note from earlier, you've got to wind up Tik Tok, he's got to wind up his action, his thought, and his speech, and it's kind of like they try and do a life lesson in it, where like he can still walk and talk even though his thought is gone, and he's like, how could you possibly do that? And Dorothy's like, people talk without thought all the time, and it's just a sort of, yeah, I don't know, it's a lesson on society, I suppose. Of course, Tik Tok's action has run out, so Dorothy must go in and do it herself. But just, this is the other thing, so the king keeps switching between stop motion and like just a bloke in a grey makeup and suit, and I had no idea why, but apparently for every less person that exists in Oz, he becomes more human, which he doesn't really explain that until like he's almost human. He's also casually wearing the ruby slippers from the first film, which is apparently the reason he was able to take over the entire Emerald City, which I think is just quite funny that he's just this massive stone guy and then he's just got a lovely little pair of ruby slippers, yeah. So Dorothy goes into the ornament room, and it turns out Tik Tok is completely fine and was just plotting against the king. His plan is to choose the wrong item so that Dorothy can see what he's turned into, allowing her to revive both him, Gump, and work out what happened to the Scarecrow. They do it, and Tik Tok fails, and there's actually no evidence of what happened to him, which didn't go to plan, did it? On Dorothy's 3rd attempt, she ends up finding an emerald, and sure enough, it's the... Oh, what the f*** is that? Why is this the Scarecrow? You're telling me this is meant to be the same guy? What is, no thanks, no. They suspect that any green ornament is what they should be looking for, and one by one, they rescue the team by choosing green ornaments. Understandably, at this point, the Gnome King is pissed, and he starts destroying the entire building and tries to eat literally everyone, starting with the Gump's body. So now the Gump is just a head. He gets a hold of Jack and is about to eat him, but this entire time the chicken has been hiding inside Jack's basically hollowed out head, and the chicken is so scared she drops an egg into the king's mouth, and it literally kills him. Like, this is why the chicken has been a threat the entire time, apparently, because the gnome can't eat eggs. Like, what sort of plot device is that, where there's just this underlying, like, threat of eggs that just so conveniently they've managed to bring in, like, a chicken with them? And again, I know this is from one of the books. I know this is, like, a real, like, Well, anyway, the king is dead, and Dorothy reclaims the ruby slippers, which, fun fact, I found out that this is the only thing they have to pay MGM for, because in the books, they're silver slippers, and Warner Brothers and MGM are the only ones that made them ruby slippers, so the fact that they paid MGM for the rights to use the ruby slippers means this is not only canonically definitely a sequel, but it's also just stupid. So Dorothy then, of course, no place like home's herself, and chooses the slippers to wish for all of Oz to come back to life and to save the Emerald City and teleport her friends back to safety. There's a heartbreaking moment where you feel like Tik Tok's been lost, but conveniently on the Gump's antler, there is a little green medal. They hold it to say Oz, he's back. And all of a sudden there's a huge celebration where Dorothy is reunited with the Tin Man and the Cowardly Lion, who this time is just actually a Tin Man and a biological lion. Obviously not a real lion, but just not like a guy who stands up and talks. Like, he's just a lion. Oh, and Tik Tok has also had like a mad polish. Like, he is shiny. He's looking like C-3PO after all the upgrades. So they're having a big celebration, and Dorothy is then deemed the Queen of Oz, but insists on having to go back to Kansas. She wishes that she could be in both places at the same time, and the slippers start glowing and doing their thing, revealing her reflection to be the girl from the beginning who drowned. What do you mean? Dorothy helps her step through the glass, and it is revealed that she is actually the Queen of Oz. Her father was once the king, and get this, because I didn't mention it, because I didn't think it'd be needed. She randomly gives Dorothy at the start of the film a pumpkin, and I should have considered Chekhov's gun. The pumpkin was in theory Jack. So this 8-year-old girl is not only the Queen of Oz, but also Jack's mother. She starts saying her goodbyes, and then it gets really bright, and Dorothy slowly fades away. Back to Kansas, where she belongs, and as if nothing ever happened. She ends up in a little patch of mud, where she's found by Toto and her family. Back on the farm, their new house is almost entirely rebuilt, and Dorothy sees the Queen in the mirror one last time, before going outside to play. And that is the end of Return to Oz. So this film wasn't the worst thing ever. I've definitely seen weirder movies, especially from the 80s, but it was just such a weird continuation of the Wizard of Oz franchise. I understand they adapted the story from a variety of books, so it makes sense, but to make it a direct sequel to this Wizard of Oz movie was such a weird choice. Dorothy looks 10 years younger. The Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Lion's new looks weren't even remotely close to the original, and the Wheelers were the most ridiculous yet underwhelming addition I have ever seen in a film. Man, let's hope that Wicked is better.